Hi, everyone. Before we get started with this episode, I want to share something really exciting with you. I have a deep passion for helping people turn their dreams into goals and then get those goals across the finish line. I've just launched a new online, on-demand version of my program, Finish It. And as a special gift to Leadership Rediscovered listeners, I'm offering 15% off the program price. Go to wvshine.com/finish it and enter the code LR15 at checkout. But don't wait. I want you to finish your goals now and not someday. So this course is only staying open for a little while and then I'm shutting it down. Go sign up now so you can finish it. Welcome to Leadership Rediscovered. I'm your host, Laura Siebold, and today I am very excited to be talking to Frank Fumich. Frank, welcome to Leadership Rediscovered.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks. Well, I'm going to read through your bio real quick, and then I want to ask you a lot of questions about your bio. So we'll start there. Frank Fumich earned his bachelor's degree in business and finance from West Virginia University in 1992. He always had a head for business. Even before graduating from WVU, Frank went into business as a partner in a food service establishment at Washington National Airport. Upon graduating from West Virginia University, Mr. Fumich began to manage that food court restaurant, which was located at Ronald Reagan National Airport. While running that very successful location, he became engrossed in the airline environment and began work as a part-time airline employee to get familiar with all aspects of the business. It was during those early years when he saw a need for another player in the airline catering world. And so in 2000, he created Express Catering, Inc., with the aspiration of filling that need. His business goal was to better serve regional aircraft in a more professional and efficient manner. When Mr. Fumich began his business, he was the only employee working in one truck in one location. Now, 24 years later, Express Catering has grown to employ over 130 employees, has more than 35 catering trucks in their fleet, operates in 3 cities, and services upwards of 500 flights per day. In his personal life, Mr. Fumich is a dedicated husband, loving father, and extreme ultra endurance athlete, which we are going to talk about. He is an adventurer at heart. He believes the human spirit soars when it is challenged. And he also aspires to continue to expand his business while continuing to help those in need. So my friend, Jamie Bell Castro, came to me and said, "Hey, Laura, you got to get Frank Fumich on your podcast." And I thought, oh, I know that name, but how do I know that name? And so I looked you up and I was like, yeah, Jamie's right. Frank definitely needs to be on the podcast. You have an interesting story, and I'm excited to introduce you maybe to people that don't know you through this episode today.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to be here. Yeah, we've been communicating for so long. I forgot how we got hooked up, but it was Jamie.
It was Jamie. Yeah. So shout out to Jamie. Thanks for connecting us.
Thanks, Jamie.
And I think it'd be really helpful just to start if you could walk us through your leadership journey and tell us your story.
Well, wow, that's a long story. So, well, you mentioned how I actually started in business. I think, as early as I can remember, I had sort of the entrepreneurial spirit. My first job was, early teenager, and I immediately recognized that, working hard can earn you money to get what you want. And I was always driven. I'm sure my parents instilled some of that in me. I mean, especially my dad, but they never really pushed me super hard into working or that sort of mentality. I just feel like my earliest memories, I always wanted to work. When it would snow and all the kids would hit the sledding hill, I would grab my shovel and start knocking on the doors of all the old people in the neighborhood. And, I'd show up at the sledding hill with $50 in my pocket after I shoveled, 10 driveways first. So, awesome. Mowing lawns, just hustling.
Yes.
That was always in my brain. And then, of course, as I got into a career, it just sort of blossomed. So, I've always had the hardworking mentality for as long as I can recall.
Yeah, no, and I think that's probably, I would imagine, what got you started in starting your own business. But it's one thing to start your own business and be just a single employee, like the only one mowing the grass or shoveling the
Right.
driveways. It's a whole other thing to build a business where you are leading an entire company of people and managing all that goes into that. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what that journey's been like for you, and if you had envisioned that it would become as big as what it is today when you first got started.
Yeah, I think I've always had grand aspirations. So, it's hard to believe that it's gotten this far, but at the same time, I guess I always did picture it getting big, and I even picture it getting bigger. So yeah, I started off. I was managing our hot dog stand. We called it. It was basically a food court restaurant at Reagan, and all my friends had 9 to 5 jobs, where the restaurant business is basically 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So I was immediately exposed to more working hours in a day, where everyone else just thinks there's 40 hours, where there's like 100 hours that you could work in a week, if
Right.
not more. And so I was always trying to find the next thing when I was working, or another way to make money. And actually, the airline job. So I worked part-time, or I worked full-time managing our restaurant. I worked part-time for the airline. Even in the summers, I worked in a bar when I went go to the beach on my 2 days off. So I was working 7 days a week.
Oh my
But
goodness.
as I got the airline job initially so I could fly for free.
Oh,
As a
very
young
smart.
kid, yeah, out of college. And I became friends with the airline people because they'd come up to eat. And I
Yeah.
learned that they were flying around for free. And I'm like, my God, that would be so much fun. So that was initially why I got the job. And then I worked out a number of years doing that. But then I started seeing so many ways that a company could improve so many aspects of the airline business.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the catering, because I was in the food business, that just sort of clicked. And I eventually told the corporate people from U.S. Airways, hey, I'll start my own catering company, and you guys know my work ethic, and you'll never have to worry about all these issues again. And of
Wow.
course, it wasn't that easy, but I put a proposal together, and I ended up getting the contract, and I was the only employee with one truck, working like 18 hours a day. I mean, the first 3 months of my business, I worked every day, 18 hours a day.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I realized, well, this is great, but if I break a leg, my business is over. So then I started hiring. That was my first experience of course, at our hot dog stand, we called it. I managed our employees, and that was my first taste of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But it was mostly my brother's company, and so obviously starting my own company and realizing that everything was on my shoulders was my
Yes.
my first real step into my own entrepreneurial work.
Yeah. Well, and this journey is always really interesting to me, because sometimes it's hard when everything's on you, the business is built on you and your individual work ethic and your good name, and then suddenly you start to grow and add people. Was that a challenging transition for you to make in terms of what your role ended up being as you started adding people to the business and operating maybe a little differently?
Yeah, of course, because nobody works as hard as at least as far as I'm concerned, as I do.
Yeah,
No one cares as much about your business as the business owner.
exactly.
100% face of the business of it, because one person in a truck could do it all.
Yeah.
And as I hired people, obviously I saw they didn't quite do as good a job as me. So it was a little bit, and I did that for years though. Obviously,
Mhm.
then I hired a manager, someone who was a friend of mine and went to WVU with me as well. And so
Oh,
he understood how important it was, and he did it as good of a job. But then as we kept getting bigger and you're hiring regular hourly employees, it's tougher, because no one quite does it as well. And I always said, if I could clone myself into 150 people, I wouldn't have anything to worry about. But you're only as good as your worst employee, basically.
yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to dive deeper on this one if you're okay going there, just more tactically, how do you ensure that your expectations are still being met, that the quality standards, I mean, I think about that initial commitment, and I know you're servicing, I'm sure, way more airlines now and doing more work, but that initial commitment you made was very much, again, based on your individual work ethic. How do you work to maintain that consistency, that high level of expectation, knowing that there's a lot of other bodies doing this work now?
Right. Well, initially it was me in an active physical role for years and years. And then when I expanded to other cities, obviously I can't be in 3 places at once. So, the next best person down is my manager. And I had to make sure that my managers who are running the show and now hiring the people know how important it is to me. And, now I have a VP of operations who also instills with the managers, and he visits the places each week. And so, yeah, it starts with a good manager. And then you have to have faith that that person is going to instill your beliefs and your work ethic into the lower level people. But yeah, it's not easy. And we have plenty of people that don't do a good enough job, and we go through people. And, the work environment these last couple of years is super brutal. It's tough to find people that appreciate a honest, hard day's work. Lots of people don't want to work. And it's tough to find people that, and, mine is a manual labor, physical job. So it does take a lot of energy, and it's tough to find people.
Well, and I would assume they're probably at least some of the time out in weather, I would imagine, depending on, because you're out. I mean,
it's 100 degrees in the summer and it's freezing. Sodas are exploding in the winter. Yeah, it's and when it rains, you're totally out in it. So it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you think about where you are today and where you sit in the business, I'd love to hear your perspective on what your individual definition of leadership is, and then how you would describe your leadership style.
Well, the one thing I learned from my dad was a hard worker, but he was also a 40-hour-a-week professional job worker. But he was he was 50 when I was born. So I was sort of brought up in a generation ahead of mine, because all my peers' parents were much younger. And my dad was a World War II veteran. And he always told me he was a second lieutenant in the Army, fought on the front lines in Italy, was a POW. And he told me that he never asked of his men anything that he wouldn't do himself. And, he has war medals where he crawled out, in the midst of enemy fire, rather than having his men do that. And I have goosebumps telling that story.
Yeah.
And I always remember that, just as far, I never served, of course, but just in work ethic, I've always done like the nastiest jobs available in my company, and even when I worked with the airline. And so my employees know that for years and years I was out there in the winter, and even up until maybe last year, I would go in on Christmas for the last 20 years and Thanksgiving, just to show them that holidays, I'm not above working on holidays, because I expect them to, because it's a 365 day a job business, and we have to be out there. So my leadership style is to do everything myself from the lowest thing up. And I won't ask any of them to do anything that I wouldn't do. I wouldn't ask them to work on any days that I wouldn't work, or I haven't worked 20 different times. And so that's my leadership style, to a fault, because sometimes I could delegate and should delegate, and I just do it myself instead.
Yeah. Well, but I think that is some of the hard transitions that happen when you go from single owner business to having multiple members on your team. It's still your business. And like you said earlier, nobody's going to care about it as much as you do. And so when you see an opportunity, I mean, you definitely sound like you've always had a lot of hustle in you. So when you see something that needs to get done, you're probably like, oh, just jump in and get it done.
Yeah, I'll just do it myself. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I can probably do it faster and quicker than the other folks. Yeah.
True. But it's definitely a lead by example leadership, for sure.
Awesome. Can we talk about Bobo for a minute?
Yeah. Oh, I love talking about Bobo.
Okay, will you just tell his story and everything that you've done and what's currently going on with him? So I've been
Yeah.
following you on Facebook
Oh, that's so
and
cool. I mean,
yeah,
it's such an amazing story. So, as I said, it's tough to find people, and
yes.
especially during COVID or, a couple years ago, it was the worst. I was walking my dogs in the middle of the day in my neighborhood, and I just spot a guy who's looks like he's delivering. He was working. Well, it turns out he was working for a grocery store delivery app. So
Mm.
he was at someone's house. He's got like 6 bags of food. And as I'm walking down, I saw him get out of his car and hustling, and I was going to stop for him, but he actually was polite enough with 6 bags of food to let me walk by with my dogs, and said, "Excuse me, sir," something like that.
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And I felt bad that he stopped for me. So I keep going, and I'm thinking in my head now, like, that's the kind of guy I need. Those are the kind of people I need working for me. Someone that's hustling,
Yeah.
someone that's polite, and he stopped for me. So I literally
Yeah.
go around the corner outside of the sight of him, and I'm just like, you know what, the hell with it. I'm just gonna go up and approach him and see if he wants a job. So I run back up. I caught him literally as he was in the car getting ready, and I knocked on his window and I said, excuse me, I know this sounds crazy. I own a business. I'm looking for employees. Are you by chance, looking for a job? Because if you see
Mhm.
someone delivering food, it's usually an indication that they're either looking for extra work or they're in
Right.
between jobs. And it's like a great way to look for people. So
Yeah.
he actually said he was. We exchanged numbers, and I ended up hiring him. And then I started, asking him his history, and he was from Cameroon, and
Mhm.
he had to escape. He was like peacefully protesting there, was arrested and basically tortured, and he somehow they let him out of jail, but he got word they were going to come back for him, and so he had to escape to another country, and then eventually made his way to the States. But he left his wife and daughter behind,
Mhm.
and he hadn't seen them in 6+ years from a couple, like a year and a half ago, when I asked him the story. And
Wow.
I asked him, what his immigration status was, and he said he had no idea, that he was just waiting for the immigration people to call him so he could apply for, the next step.
Mhm.
So long story short, after more communication with him, I decided to see if we could get him some legal representation and to help him along. So I did that. I paid for his lawyer, and been involved in this whole process, and have learned so much. And it basically, without a lawyer, these poor people are just waiting, can wait for years and years. So we
Yes.
ended up, it's a certain legal term, but basically you sue the US government to take the case. And
Oh.
so after a year and a half of waiting and preparing, Bobo finally had his hearing about a month and a half ago.
Mhm.
And so I've been sharing it on social media for a year and a half. And,
Wow.
oh, and in the year before, because Bobo's actually my best worker, and he just works every day, open to close, doesn't take days off. And I mentioned this a couple of Thanksgivings ago, and people are like, "Oh, let Bobo have a day." And I said, I let him. I want him to take that day off, but he doesn't want
He
to,
won't.
because he wants to save his money to prepare for them
Yeah.
one day, and he sends money back. And so I did a GoFundMe, and we in 2 days raised $17,000.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
gave it. And so I called on Thanksgiving, or no, it was Christmas 2 years ago. I said, Bobo, I got to meet you at work at 5:30. I have something. And he was, poor guy, he was nervous. He thought he was in trouble. And
Oh.
I surprised him with a check for $17,000 just for
Wow.
him, for his expenses, to take a couple days, whatever. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
I shared that on social media, and then it blew up, and then everyone has been following Bobo's case. And then, of course, and so then about 2 weeks ago, the answer came from the government, and it was approved. And I went down, and Bobo and I opened the letter together. I don't know if you saw that video.
Oh yeah, and I was just gonna
Yeah,
say, people who are listening and watching, definitely go find the video because
yeah.
it is
Oh,
really emotional to
yeah, it
watch.
was so cool. It was super emotional, and yeah, it was so great. So his status has been approved, and we immediately are now working on bringing his daughter and wife here that he hasn't seen in over 7 years.
Oh my gosh.
And that, I mean, when that, it's probably going to take about a year, but I'm telling you, when that happens, it's going to be incredible, and will probably be on like national news or something because so many people are into it.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it's also, as you know, I talk about leadership on this podcast. And one of my goals is to try to get people to think a little bit differently about how they can demonstrate leadership and model leadership, and that it's not just about being the boss or telling people what to do. There's all these different opportunities that exist around us to show and demonstrate leadership. And I think this is a wonderful example of, you saw a need, you stepped in. I'm sure there's a lot of people like Bobo in companies right now that maybe people know about their situation, maybe they don't, but you took it upon yourself to say, hey, listen, this is a really good worker. I care about this person and I want to do this for him. And I know, because I used to work on immigration cases, I know that it is very expensive to do all of the legal fees that are associated with that process. I mean, it's a lot of money to do that, and not only time and investment, or time and other investments for you, but I think it's such a great example of the impact and influence that you can have in someone's life. And I think about the loyalty he probably feels towards you and the type of work that he probably puts forth. I mean, like you said, 7 days a week and won't stop.
I mean, I'm certainly getting something out of it. It's, I mean, I did it initially to be a nice person. But you're right. I mean, he does feel super loyal, and he would probably do anything for me. Now, an example of, I've hired about a dozen Afghan refugees as well.
Oh, wow.
And I've also paid for all of their legal fees. And but Bobo and them, I don't say I'm doing this and you guys have to stay. I literally have done nothing. So I'm trying to do it out of the goodness of my heart. Of course, I'm hoping they'll feel some appreciation and will stay and work hard, but that's not always the case. As I was just about to tell you that I've just lost 2 of my Afghan guys. I've learned that, being youthful and responsive and a little bit lack of responsibility is not just an American problem. You know what I mean? It spreads through many ethnicities. And so I'm experiencing a little bit of that now. And, I paid for their lawyers. I didn't say, hey, I paid for your lawyers. I mean, a part of me wanted to, but I didn't. So I have lost, I have lost a couple guys that I paid for their representation, and they're no longer with me. But for the most part, Bobo, I mean, is just so appreciative, and it's been an incredible experience so far.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. And I think that's an important point that you made around, listen, I'm not doing it because I'm trying to manipulate a situation or create employees for life. I did it out of kindness of my heart. And sometimes that comes back around in terms of loyalty and commitment. And sometimes it doesn't, but that's not, that's not the purpose in doing it.
And that's it. And that's just really from my own internal gauge of trying to be a good person. So I know that I'm not making them do anything, and they're totally free to go. And if they stay, wonderful. And if they don't, well, I still have helped somebody a little bit.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that no one can take that away. So that regardless of where they go with it. So I'd said at the beginning of our conversation, I knew your name, but it took me a while to make the connection. And then I realized, then when I realized, well, I don't know, you're so interesting. There's so many good stories out there about you and your relatives as well. But I realized I knew your name because of the fundraising that you did for Jack Rollins.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going the relative thing, right?
So I do want to talk about, because you are an ultra endurance athlete. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, I guess so.
And
that's not what my wife would call it, but
everyone who's watching and listening, again, you got to go out. Well, you have your website, which is just www.frankfumich.com, right?
Correct.
And then, but also on YouTube, I went and watched some of your videos. I mean, this is extreme. You had, I think the one you did for Jack, and I'd love to hear about it, was through the Arctic. And again, I would think, even just taking a leisurely walk, not that you would through the Arctic, but even that would be very challenging. But I mean, you were running on what looks to be ice. And And wearing a lot of gear because obviously you would have to. So that adds a lot of weight. And then you're also pulling a cart behind you. And I just want to hear all about, you've done a lot of really extreme races. And I'd love to hear what got you started in that. And then also what flipped you into the fundraising aspect of it, because I know a lot of times you're doing this to help other people as well.
Right. Well, it's a good time for that question because it actually started, the 10-year anniversary of the Boston Marathon was just a couple of weeks ago. And that's when the whole, well, I mean, I was an endurance athlete and did all kinds of crazy stuff. But then when you do a lot of stuff, actually that story just started kind of on its own. When the bombings happened and I knew lots of people running, and when I found out all the people I knew were okay, you know, just like everybody else, I was super angry that it had happened, and that, you know, we had to be scared that you can't go outside for fear of being attacked by something. Right. And then I learned about the victims, and having kids at that time, young kids, you know, it's sort of like your life before kids and then how you feel about things after you have children. And so when I learned about that little boy that was killed, it just kind of blew me away. And so I decided, just spontaneously, I put a post out on Facebook that I was just going to run my standard route down by the airport. It's literally like 3 miles one direction, 3 miles back. I was going to go back and forth and run a marathon distance, 26.2 miles for each of the 3 victims initially. So which is like 70, what is that? 78 point whatever.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of people joining me, and I said I was going to raise money and send it to them. I had no idea how to reach them or anything. It was just totally spontaneous. And it ended up just being incredible. And I raised, my goal was to raise $26,200 in unison with 26.2 marathon. And I did that. And initially I was going to give it to the little boy's family only. But then I decided, well, instead of just sending them a check, well, how about running it from DC to Boston, and we'll raise more money. And so,
okay, wait, how far is that? That's
far.
It's
like 400 and some miles, right? It's totally crazy. Most people would just take a plane or just send it in the mail, but only me decided to, how about if I just run to Boston? So anyway, we organized it. A friend of mine joined me, and we actually alternated. So I would run 26.2 miles. He would run, and we did it 24/7 for 4 days. Ran 400 some miles to Boston. Was on the news. Had tons of strange. I'm still friends with strangers that came out of their houses at like 2 a.m. on some little town somewhere between here and Boston, and joined us in the middle of the night. Like, we pulled a gas station, and people would fill up our gas. We like I mean, it was unbelievable. So many people got into it. We ended up raising almost $80,000. And we gave half to the little boy's family, half to Jeff Bowman, who was the sort of the poster child of the explosion when he lost both his legs. And anyway, I could talk for hours about that whole experience on its own. But anyway, that's what started the whole giving thing. And I was blown away by how so many people got into it and would love to help, but also love being taken along for the ride and experiencing it, and seeing it, and seeing videos, and seeing how we felt. Like, people don't want to just, I mean, they do, but they don't necessarily just want to click a button to a charity and never see where their money goes to put a goal out there to help someone go through the pain of like a race or a crazy adventure, to show how much it's hurting you, to do some good, and then to literally share, handing the money, like giving a check to the person, is so great. And so that's what started all. And then I started the other one. So the one with little Jack, where I did run 350 miles from the Arctic Circle to the Arctic Ocean in Canada, pulling a sled where it was like minus 40 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
And I think we raised like 30-some thousand for little Jack, who, of course, as you know, tragically passed. And then another West Virginia friend hooked me up with another mom, and her daughter Erin had cancer, and I did another crazy race in Mexico, a DECA Ironman, which was like a 10 times Ironman. I raised $50,000 for her care. Then I biked across the U.S. and raised money for another WVU student who was beaten up and left it basically in a vegetative state.
Yes.
Ryan.
Ryan. Yep.
And raised over 100,000 for his care, and
oh my gosh.
kind of just, and it became such a meaningful thing to do what I do, but also instead of selfishly just doing it for my own like medal on the wall, to actually help people. It was like a perfect meeting of passions, and it's been I've been doing it for 10 years now, in a variety of stuff like that.
Wow. Well, it's so incredible. And I think about, first of all, I mean, you're really pushing yourself to the limits and beyond in each of these examples. I mean, you've run a lot of different races and done a lot of different challenges. And I think about the mental game that's required to do that. And I'm sure it is probably, if I put myself in your shoes, it would help keep me going sometimes, knowing that, hey, I'm not just doing this for a medal on the wall. I'm doing this to really help someone in need.
Totally. And the first time I biked across the country twice. The first time I did not finish. I DNF'd, did not finish in a race, and I stopped in Clarksburg, West Virginia. But the only reason I got that far even was because of Ryan and his family, just wanting his parents to see that I was just, and the longer I stayed in it, the more money I was going to raise, to be totally honest.
Yes.
If you got 12 days to raise money and you drop out on day 2, you just missed a whole week plus of when people are going to give money. And the second time I did it for a cancer charity, but I highlighted a different child each day. I literally had their pictures printed. I had their pictures physical on my handlebars. So I was literally staring at them I was biking 20 hours a day. And looking at those kids' faces was the only reason and I did finish, but it was the only reason I didn't drop out halfway through, because that was the only reason to keep going. Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. And I saw when you were going across the Arctic, I saw little Jack's beautiful face, his picture on your cart, which was just unbelievable.
Fact, there it is right there. I raced across it. So I did get a medal. I did
get a medal.
Although, you know what? I mean, in another sad side story, my day 12 child was the daughter of a friend of mine, and she passed. And I sent her that medal, and she had it for a couple of years. And when she passed, her dad gave it back to me. So I didn't have a medal, and I wish I didn't have it now, because that would mean she would still have it. But so tragically, lots of the stories don't have happy endings because of this childhood cancer thing is so horrible.
Yes.
But some do, but I don't know how the parents of these kids can go on. So that's another reason, another motivational aspect to keep pedaling was just thanking God that my kids didn't have cancer, and I can keep putting one foot in front of the other for these families. And so that's what kept me going a lot.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I would love to hear, I mean, I'm sure there's been you have a lot of time to think while you're doing these races, and a lot of lessons to be learned. And to me, there's probably a lot of things that transfer over, things that you can take, lessons you can take from these ultra endurance races and challenges that you can apply to your business. And then business lessons that you can apply to when you're doing these competitions. So I'd love to hear any things that you've taken away, leadership lessons or just life lessons that you've been able to apply in either of those contexts.
Yeah, it's mostly the life lessons and just the mentality of both parts of my life, the crazy races, endurance, and business. They totally mesh perfectly. It's unbelievable. One of the most important things I always tell myself in the midst of just nightmare scenarios during the endurance stuff, when you're not even rational, is to try to maintain some level of optimism, that when you're biking or running through all night long, that eventually the sun is going to come up. Right. And also in business, like every time something bad has happened, I am confident that some door will open, something good will come out of this. when I first started, I started in 2020. I was in my truck working when 9/11 happened, where I
Oh,
literally ran to the Pentagon on foot to see if I could help. But that shut, and a lot of people don't remember, but they closed Reagan Airport for like a month after
yes. I forgot
9/11.
about that until you
Yeah, and
said so. Yeah.
that was my only location at the time. So I was totally closed. I thought that was the end of my business. I had 105 flights a day, I think, at that point. In a month or so later, they started back up with 3 flights a day. And I was so excited just to have 3 flights. And but I knew I just knew something would shake out positive. So I hung in there, and eventually the airline went bankrupt. US Airways went bankrupt. So I went through that, and that just means they don't pay me
Right.
for, that's what that means. So
Yeah.
they went through one bankruptcy, then they went through another bankruptcy, but then that disbanded their unions, which was my barrier to expand to other airports. So because
Oh,
because of 9/11 basically, and because of the bankruptcies, eventually that enabled me to expand.
wow.
So, that's one, that's a lot of people could have thrown in the towel, and because even the airline said, we'll let you get out of your contract. We know it's not worth working
Hmm.
for 3 flights a day. But anyway, so going through all the, 9/11, 2 bankruptcies, 2 airline mergers, and then a pandemic.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any bumpier than that. But even the pandemic, we created other revenue streams out of thin air. Basically, we just thought of other things to do to help offset the loss of revenue. And then
Hmm.
those things have now remained now that COVID's basically over and flights are back. So now my revenue is actually, and I'm not sure we would have thought of that had
Hmm.
had we faced such a issue with revenue going off a cliff and scrambling to try to be, and I'm much more leaner now. So I learned a lot of things I could do better, and it's made my company better now that we've made it through all that stuff, all that adversity.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and so, so a lot of that could be applied to, running through the middle of the night for 100 miles, where you feel
Yeah.
like you can't go on, but you got to hold a little bit of hope. And then, you get some energy, the sun comes up and you're like, wow, yeah, I think I can do this.
I can do
And
it.
so, yeah, it's very parallel thinking on both things.
For sure. And I would assume it also alters your perspective on what truly is a disaster or what truly is something that a challenge that you can't recover from. I mean, I saw you talking and I noticed your thumb, and we didn't even cover the fact that
Oh, right,
you've
right.
definitely taken some physical hits.
Yeah, I keep forgetting. I'll share pictures and people are like, oh, your thumb. I'm almost forgot about it. But yeah, I've got my scars and my things that aren't quite healed yet.
Yeah.
Um,
But I
yeah.
would think that that likely impacts your perspective on when you feel like maybe you're having a bad day in your business. Maybe your definition of a bad day might be different than someone else's definition of a bad day.
Yeah, things can get a whole lot worse. Trust me. Yeah, I tend to look at the positive, not the negatives, for
I love
sure.
that. That's awesome. So I think about just all the work that you are doing in your own business, and then also these races that you're completing, the things that you're doing for other people. I mean, you're really, to me, these are so many good examples of how leadership can present itself, how you can have a positive impact and a positive influence in many aspects of life. And I just like to hear from you. Is there a specific, do you think about legacy, or do you think about these are, I hope someday this is how people think of me or talk about me? Is that something that you think about at all in terms of what you want your legacy to be or how you want to be known for?
That's a good question. I don't really think about what people will think about me. What I do think about, what I like to do is influence people to what they're just going to do now, not necessarily what they
Mm,
think about me. I mean, I get a lot of kudos with, tons of people send me messages about all the stuff I'm doing. But the ones I like the most are people that saw what I did and do it themselves. And
yeah.
then they share, just like a random act of kindness. I'm big on that. And just buying random lunches for veterans I see at a
Mm,
McDonald's or whatever. And I've shared that. And then people say they've done the same thing. And so that's what I'm really trying to do is
yeah.
lead by example, to do good too,
Yeah.
and to help people, or just ask, it's not always about money. It's just being nice. And I share backgrounds of my employees, and people have told me, wow, I've never even asked some of my guys like where they're from, or any of this stuff. And so, if it's just showing people to be friendlier to people and just help people, but it's mostly to show people examples of what to do and
Yeah.
change the world for a better place now, not necessarily on what they're going to remember me for.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And that's honestly why I wanted to bring you on this show and talk to you, because I do think, my hope is that the work that you are doing, and as you tell these stories, it will inspire people and remind them that you can do it too. If Frank can do it, I can. I mean, maybe not race across the Arctic and things like that, but
Yeah, you don't have to do crazy things to make a difference. That's for sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
little things can go a long way.
There's just I think so many opportunities out there that just we're surrounded by them in terms of where we can step in, where we can help. And I feel like it seems like much of
Unlimited.
your story is you identified a need and you thought about, here's how I can close that gap or fill that need.
Yeah, they're unlimited. The opportunities are unlimited. You just have to open your eyes, look around you, and see someone need something, and try to step up. And that's one of the good aspects of social media. I mean, most of social media now is just horrible, and it's just a bunch of crap, and there's so much hatred. But I try not to post anything political. No issues that are going to cause arguments. I just want to sort of shine a light on feel good stories, and inspire people to want to do the same is really fun.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so incredible that you're doing it. And I'm glad that you're doing it because you are serving as an example for others. And I can't imagine it hasn't impacted people and given them ideas about how they can help, even just from a leadership perspective of, gosh, I could probably get to know my people better that are working on the team. And maybe someone has a need that I'm not aware of that I actually can help them out in some way. I can get them the resources or connect them to resources or whatever the case may be. But I have the ability to influence that if I choose to. And I think you're a great example of that within business and then outside of business too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So, last question before we do the lightning round. If we could flip to that, I'm just curious, as you think about, you were referencing younger folks starting in your business. If you think about newer, younger leaders that are starting out and maybe they're starting their own business or maybe they're stepping into a leadership role for the first time, but I'd love to hear what advice you would give them and things that you've learned along your journey that you could pass along at this point, given, that you've been in this business for a while now.
Oh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing is just hard work, a great work ethic. I don't think employers value anything more than hard work, especially today. Yeah, lots of people think that also there's only, 40 hours in a week.
Yeah.
You can work so much more. You can get a second job. I mean, this is like super basic stuff, obviously,
That was
but
important.
it all stems from a great work ethic. And when you work hard, even if you don't realize it, people will notice. And everything I've gotten and all the doors that have opened for me are because I was a hard worker. I was never the smartest guy in the room. I don't have any incredible skills. I could just outwork anybody, and people will appreciate that. And doors will open for you if people know that you're a hard worker and you're trustworthy and you're honest. I mean, only good things can come if you have those qualities.
Yeah,
And
that's so true.
super basic, but that's what I would tell people: hard work.
No, I feel like it's becoming a personal competitive advantage for people if they are wired to want to work hard and willing to work hard. It really, I think, does set people apart, especially right now, because we are struggling to sometimes find people that are willing to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Okay, very good. Well, how about flipping over here to the lightning round to close out our session? You game for that?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I'll give it a go.
I'm going to pull up my timer here. All right. So it's 60 seconds to answer the most as many open-ended questions as you can. I'm going to start my timer now. Okay. What season best fits your personality?
Summer.
Okay. What's your most used emoji in text?
Smiley face.
What book, song, movie, or podcast has had the greatest impact on your life?
Oh, God. Into Thin Air book.
Oh, okay. Very good. What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it?
I can take a great nap.
I don't know how you'd have time for that. Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on
Races and adventures.
What celebrity would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh my God. I have no idea.
I feel like Hugh Jackman would be good.
Okay,
He's older than
I can
you,
be down
but
with
like
that.
I feel like you know how just like the Wolverine.
That
I feel
guy's
like
a stud. Okay, good one.
yeah, we could go with that one. All right. If you wrote a book, what would the title be?
The Misadventures of Frank.
That's so great. Oh, okay. I got to ask you this last question because I think it'll be an interesting answer. If you catch me by the fridge at night, I'm probably sneaking.
Probably a sandwich.
Yeah.
Yeah, late night sandwich.
Well, listen, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to get to talk to you because I have been following you on social media for a little while now. And I definitely encourage other people to do the same and to do a deeper dive into the races that you've done already. And is there one coming up? Are you training for something right now?
No, not really. Not for a little while. I'm actually running a marathon in the morning, strangely enough, but it's just
no big deal.
Just to keep in shape. Yeah, not a big one.
Okay. Well, we'll be following you to see what your misadventures
Thank
or
you so
adventures.
much. It was a pleasure being on.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Great story. And I think you're really inspirational. And I hope that this will be a great example for other leaders who are watching.
Oh, that's nice of you to say. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate your time and great meeting you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Thanks. Take care.